Hello everyone, I'm Michaela Kathleen, and I'm here today with another tier ranking video, and this time I'll be tier ranking young adult contemporary novels. And once again, I like to use the O.W.L.s grading scale from Harry Potter for my tier rankings. So that would be O for outstanding, E for exceeds expectations, A for acceptable, P for poor, D for dreadful, and T for troll. So, jumping right in, my first book on this list is Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. And this is one that I read for the first time earlier this year. It's actually the first book that I read after starting my booktube channel. And I went into this a little bit wary because it is more of a straight up romance, which sometimes is not my cup of tea, and I had definitely heard some mixed reviews on this one, and I wasn't sure how silly it would be, I guess, but I was really pleasantly surprised. It definitely is a light, fluffy, fun read, definitely packed with romance, but it's also got some deeper stuff in there that I was surprised to find. And honestly, this one was just a joy to read and was a really great note to start my booktube channel on, I felt. And so this one, for me, definitely exceeded my expectations. Next, I have I Love You, Beth Cooper by Larry Doyle. And with this one, I had seen the movie first and I really enjoyed it. It was a really funny, fun movie. And the writer was actually primarily a screenwriter, and I believe he had written the book first because he wanted to try his hand at writing a book. But then he, of course, ended up making a movie out of it anyways. And I do think his strength kind of lies in movie writing more so than book writing. It was certainly still a fun book, but definitely did not meet my expectations. And so this one for me, even though I kept it and I do like it well enough, I decided to put it in the poor category since, based on the movie, it just kind of fell short for me a little bit. Next, I have The One Memory of Flora Banks. And this one I won from the First in Line Club, which was a membership, a year-long membership that I won from Barnes & Noble, where I was sent advanced reader copies for a year, which was very exciting, and these books were definitely very hit and miss. This one was one that I did keep. So it was a hit, but not one of the bigger hits on that list. It was certainly a fun, cute, light read. And so for me, this one lands in the acceptable category. Next, I have 10 Things I Can See From Here, which is another one that I got from that First in Line Club, and this one was one of the ones that was a bit of a miss. I was super excited when I got this one because it has a really gorgeous cover and it's about a main character with social anxiety and just anxiety in general. And I have a bit of social anxiety myself, so I always find it fun to read characters who are also dealing with these issues. So this one I went into with pretty high expectations, and then it was just really boring, and I just really didn't find myself connecting with any of the characters really, but most especially the main character that I was expecting to connect with as much as I thought I would. And so this one was kind of a big miss for me, and I did not keep the book. So for me, this one was dreadful. Next, I have The Fashion Committee by Susan Juby, and this was yet another one of those First in Line books. And this was another hit for me. It was certainly not a new favorites or anything. It was just a super fun, light read. I really didn't have much expectations going into this one. It looked like it was going to be just a little bit too fluffy for me. And certainly there was nothing deep in this book at all, but it was just a really fun read. And I kind of liked reading about these kids who are really into fashion because I'm kind of into fashion myself. And they were just really passionate about fashion. So this was another acceptable one for me. Next, I have An Abundance of Katheryn's by John Green. John Green is my favorite author, and Katheryn's is one of my favorite books by him. It is really just a laugh out loud book, which I don't have a lot of books that make me laugh out loud. Beth Cooper, for example, which should be one. But Katheryn's is just really funny and such a fun read. And so this one easily and definitely lands in outstanding for me. Next, I have Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl. And I saw the movie for this one before the book, and I liked the movie quite a bit. It definitely fell in a trend that was going on at that time in books, and it was a trend that I myself kind of enjoyed reading. And then the book ended up being kind of a miss for me. I didn't really like any of the characters very much, and I don't remember it super well, but I feel like it sort of had a different storytelling mechanic. I don't remember what it was, but I feel like it was just a little bit different than most books, and I just didn't connect, I think, with the writing style. I did keep the book, because I didn't like totally dislike it. Like, I liked it, it just was a slight miss for me, and after seeing the movie was kind of a disappointment. So since I kept the book, but it also just did not meet my expectations, I decided to put it in the poor category, along with I Love You, Beth Cooper. Next, I have Looking for Alaska by John Green. And Alaska is definitely not my most favorite John Green book, but it is still John Green, and it's one that I still really love. The first time I read it, I was quite young, and so I did not like it at all the first time I read it. But then I rediscovered John Green when I read The Fault in Our Stars, and I remembered that this book from deep in my early teen years that I didn't enjoy had also been by him, and so I went back and reread it and liked it much better when I was older. And so I had still gone into it with a little bit of low expectations, considering I had read it before and I remembered not liking it. So then when I did like it so much on the second read, it definitely exceeded my expectations. Next, I have Love Blind. This is a book that I got specifically because I was interested in the main character, one of the two main characters, who is going blind. As a kid, I kind of had a weird fear that I would go blind when I was older because my eyesight was so bad as a kid. Just silly kid fears. But for that reason, I felt like I would be able to kind of connect with this character. Of course, this character is actually going blind and has a legitimate reason to be worried about that. But it was just an interesting perspective that I had not read before. I had not read any characters who were blind or going blind. And then the other main character is sort of dealing with, again, social anxiety and things like that. So another character that I kind of could connect with. So I went into this one with pretty high expectations, and I definitely did enjoy it, and it was an interesting book, and both of the main characters were definitely interesting perspectives. But it wasn't, I was kind of expecting that it had the potential to become like a top favorite, and it didn't do that. So I put this one in the acceptable category. Next, I have The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This is another one where I saw the movie first, and I really enjoyed the movie, and then I read the book, and I didn't like it as much. I think in the book, the main character is a little bit more childlike than he is portrayed in the movie, and I don't know, it was just almost to a level where I feel like it made me not connect with the main character as much. So this one kind of ended up being a little bit of a disappointment. The writing style, I think I didn't fully connect with either, and for that reason I put it in the poor category. Next, I have Attachments by Rainbow Rowell. Rainbow Rowell is probably my second or third favorite author. John Green, Scott Westfeld, and Rainbow Rowell are all kind of up there in the top three, and Attachments is one of my favorite Rainbow Rowell books. This is another one that for me is laugh out loud funny. As I said before, I don't laugh out loud at books a lot, and when I think of books that I do, the two that come to mind are An Abundance of Katherine's and Attachments. And this one is also just such a cute love story, and so this one for me definitely lands in outstanding. Next, I have All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven, and this is actually the second book I read by her. and I really enjoyed the first book I read by her, so I had pretty high expectations going into this one, and I didn't like this one as much as I liked the first one, but it just still exceeded my expectations. I think Jennifer Niven is potentially a favorite new author. I read her books pretty recently, and her writing style really kind of reminds me of John Green, and so definitely both of the books that I've read by her I just love very much. Next, I have Love Letters to the Dead, which I remember wanting this book for a long time before getting around to buying it and reading it. I really loved the cover, the title was very intriguing, I thought it seemed like a very interesting concept, and so this one I again had pretty high expectations for, partly because I waited so long before I actually got around to getting it, so I had time to really build up my interest. And then it was really just a perfectly acceptable book. It was definitely interesting to read and just, yeah, like a solid book, but nothing that got me like super excited. Next, I have Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan, and this is a very recent read for me. I just read this book earlier in July, and I had seen the movie and I didn't really love the movie. Like, it was just kind of, it was a movie. I had no interest in ever seeing it again, really. But I thought the book might be a little better. Don't judge a book by its movie and all that. And so I still wanted to read the book. And then I ended up really disliking the book, much more than I disliked the movie. Because again, I didn't really dislike the movie, it just was kind of boring for me. But then yeah, I found just a lot of the stuff in the book kind of objectionable, and I just really didn't enjoy reading it, and there was not a single likable character for me, and so yeah, this one was just a really big miss for me. So this one for me is Troll. Next, I have Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, and this is my absolute favorite Rainbow Rowell book. I connect so much with the main character. We have so much in common. The main character, again, has some social anxiety, and she also happens to live where I live and go to school where I go to school. So definitely reading this book was just a lot of fun, and it's the book that I probably connect with most out of all of my books. So this one easily lands an outstanding for me. Next, I have Finding Audrey by Sophie Kinsella. And this is another one where I picked it up because the main character has social anxiety, kind of a trend among the contemporary YAs for me. So I was pretty excited for it because I typically connect well with these characters. But this one was just kind of a boring read for me. I didn't really get much out of it, and I did not hang on to the book. So this one for me was dreadful. Next, I have The Spectacular Now. This is another one where I saw the movie first, and this time the book held up. I probably liked the movie and the book pretty equally. A lot of times I'll like a book more than the movie version, but in this case they were pretty equal. And so this one was pretty much exactly what I expected it to be from the movie. So for me, this landed in acceptable. Because the movie and the book, neither are like ones that I would consider a top favorite, but I definitely really enjoyed them both. Next, I have Girl in Pieces by Katheryn Glasgow, and this is another one that I got from that First in Line club, and this was one of the bigger misses for me from that club. I really didn't enjoy the main character at all. I think that was probably the main problem with the book. I found the book kind of long and just a slog. And it was a story that, I don't know, I just didn't really enjoy it. I'm not sure if it was meant to really be an enjoyable story, to be fair, but it's one that I just didn't personally connect with. So for me, this one was Troll. Next, I have It's Kind of a Funny Story, and this is yet another one where I watched the movie first and was kind of disappointed by the book. I did keep the book because I enjoyed it well enough. It didn't meet, again, my expectations. So once again, I'm gonna put this one in the poor category. Next, I have Holding Up the Universe by Jennifer Niven, and this is the first book that I read by Jennifer Niven. This was another First in Line Club book, and this was one of the biggest hits of that club for me. I loved this story so much. For me, both of the main characters were so interesting to read about, and it was such a beautiful little love story, and this one is just really a joy to read. It is so happy, and so this one for me is outstanding. Next, I have If I Stay, and this one I really am not sure. I think I read the book first, but I'm not quite sure. Regardless, it's such a beautiful story, so emotional, and I definitely enjoyed the movie so much as well. I don't think I had super high expectations for this one. It's sort of one of those stories where a character is dying and takes on like ghostly presence, which is a trope that I don't necessarily dislike, but it's not one that I like get super excited for. And so this one definitely exceeded my expectations, considering it was such a recognizable trope. Sometimes if a trope is like a big part of a story, like a really recognizable trope, that might turn me off a bit. But this one did not. Next, I have Kids of Appetite by David Arnold, and this was another First in Line Club. And this was another First in Line Club one that was a big hit for me. This is probably my favorite book of all of the books that I got from that club. So of course, this obviously belongs in outstanding. Next, I have Landline by Rainbow Rowell, and this is one of her books that is not my most favorite Rainbow Rowell book. I feel like I don't connect with the characters in this one as much as the characters in Fangirl or even the characters in Attachments, and it's just not as funny and for me as fun of a storyline as some of her other ones. So for me, this one is just acceptable. Next, I have Mosquito Land by David Arnold. After reading Kids of Appetite, I wanted to go back and read his first book because I was super excited for his books after reading Kids of Appetite, because that one just shot up to near the top of my favorites list immediately. And then Mosquito Land was a huge disappointment. It was just kind of a strange book, and I just really didn't connect with the main character and wasn't really interested in the story. I found it pretty slow and boring, and probably my really high expectations hurt it a little bit, but I just really didn't enjoy this one at all, and so this one is troll for me. So got David Arnold at both ends of the spectrum. Next, I have Paper Towns by John Green, which this is not my most favorite John Green book. It feels slightly like a rehash of Looking for Alaska, and it is a more boring rehash. It is definitely, I think, longer than it needs to be. It does drag a bit, but I still love his writing style, and I still enjoyed the book. So this one for me just lands in acceptable. Next, I have Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell, which of the Rainbow Rowell books I've read. I have not read any of the Fangirl spin-offs Carry On, that series. So of the ones that I've read, this is probably my least favorite Rainbow Rowell book. It was interesting to read a book that took place in the 80s, and I still enjoy her writing style, but this one was a little slow for me, and the switching back and forth between the two main characters' perspectives was pretty quick, a lot of like really short chapters. And so this is one that I just didn't connect with as much. So this one for me is just acceptable. Next, I have A Prom to Remember, which is another one that I got from that First in Line Club, and I did not keep the book. It was pretty fluffy, light sort of kind of teen book, kind of like The Fashion Committee, but it just didn't have, I don't know, the fun that The Fashion Committee had to me. It was one that was light and fun with like really no substance, and wasn't even very light or fun. It was more so just trying to be that, but not really succeeding. I didn't really enjoy any of the characters, and there just wasn't much to the storyline. So this one for me was dreadful. Next, I have The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas, and this one I saw the movie before reading the book, and I loved the movie so much. I loved the movie more than The Fault in Our Stars, which is my favorite YA contemporary book and just one of my favorite books. And so I went into the book with extremely high expectations. I expected the book to kind of, build on the movie and have more than the movie, because that's how adaptations typically work. But I found that the movie had actually added some stuff in that I really liked. Most importantly, there's a very pivotal scene at the end of the movie that really drives the whole message home in a really strong way. And so I kind of spent the whole book waiting to get to that scene, and then that scene wasn't in the book. It was something that the movie had added. And so I feel like the movie really did build upon the book and make the story even stronger. So then the book kind of came in as a bit of a disappointment for me. I still really enjoyed it. I don't know if I fully connected with the writing style, but I still really love the story. Like, obviously the movie is the story of the book with just a few things added, and I loved the movie even more than my most favorite young adult contemporary. So I still definitely really loved the book, but without that pivotal scene, just not quite as much as the movie, and so it didn't meet the expectations that I had for it, and so I put this one in acceptable. Next, I have The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants by Anne Brochures, and this is really the first YA contemporary that I read as a young teen that I really liked, and it's one that's just been with me from the beginning of my YA journey, so definitely a lot of sentimental value on this one. Me and my friends used to read this one together, so it was a great one to read with friends, and we even did our own version of the pants. So definitely a bedrock of my YA reading experience, but doesn't quite hold up to the level of some of these other ones now that I'm older. So this one for me goes in exceeds expectations. Next, I have Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. And this is another one where I just don't quite connect with it as much as some of his other books. I feel like the plot on this one was a little bit of a miss for me. And yeah, definitely just not one of my favorites of his. And so for me, this one is just acceptable. Next, I have Windfall by Jennifer E. Smith, and this was another one of those first in line books. And this is another one that was just sort of a light, fun read. Nothing that I really disliked about it, but nothing super special about it either for me. So for me, this one landed in acceptable. And finally, I have The Fault in Our Stars, which, as you may guess from what I've said about it earlier in the video, is easily outstanding for me. I read this one before watching the movie, and the movie was definitely not as good as the book. This is the book that I sort of credit my current level of love for contemporary YA. Before reading The Fault in Our Stars, I didn't read contemporary or YA a whole lot, mostly just The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. But after reading this one, it has become probably the genre that I read the most. And yeah, that is my tier ranking of the contemporary YA books that I have read. Let me know down below what you think of my ranking, and thanks for watching. Remember, words matter.